Hello, it's Bethany with American Motherhood. Thank you for joining us for this very special episode as we share our live panel discussion, Bridging the Gap, Motherhood and Civic Life. Before we begin, we want to express our deep gratitude to our incredible panelists and moderator for giving their time, insight, and encouragement to this conversation. We're also so thankful for the moms in our community who showed up on a Saturday and for you taking the time to listen as you go about your day. We hope this conversation leaves you feeling encouraged, validated, and energized to find your footing within civic life in whatever way makes sense for you. Whether that's staying informed, attending local meetings, volunteering, advocating, running for office, or simply having more intentional conversations with the people around you. If this discussion resonates, please share it with a friend. And if you'd like to hear more conversations like this, subscribing to the podcast and leaving a review helps us continue growing this work and reaching more families across Ohio. Okay, welcome to Bridging the Gap, Motherhood and Civic Life.
Ready? Yes. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Bethany.
I'm Haley.
And we're two Westerville moms behind American Motherhood. This brand really started with recognizing that so many of us care deeply about our communities, but we often don't feel equipped, informed, or even invited to the conversations that shape them. At least we certainly didn't.
So what started as a podcast has grown into a civic education platform designed specifically for moms.
We're living in a moment where civic life can feel overwhelming and polarizing, and the tension within our communities can make it harder to engage. Today isn't about doing everything at once or trying to save the world. Bridging the Gap is about closing the distance between where we are and where we want to be.
We want this to be a place where moms from all backgrounds feel welcome, where learning is encouraged, conversations are respectful, and no one feels like they have to figure it out alone. We are excited to introduce our moderator, Ohio House Representative Beryl Piccolantonio, or as we like to call her, Rep. Beryl. She is very well versed in all of today's topics as both an elected leader and a mom of three. So we'll let her take it from here. But first, know that if you have not had the pleasure of meeting Beryl or any of today's panelists, you're in for a very special conversation.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for, I guess, coming out on a Saturday morning. I think especially if you have young kids, there are probably a gazillion other things that you could be doing right now, maybe feel like you should be doing. But thanks for choosing to come here. I think it'll be a really good conversation. I'm going to really briefly introduce myself, and then I'll have each of the panelists introduce themselves. I want to say thank you to Bethany and to Haley. One of the things that I have thought about a lot is how to just kind of bridge the gap for some people between what they think politics or policy is and their everyday lives. I grew up in a way that I have realized is not very typical, where my family was kind of immersed in politics and government my entire life, but that is not the case for most people. And so figuring out how to make it a more comfortable space so that people just become more familiar with the kinds of decisions that they're being asked to make at the ballot box, why those decisions matter, how to come in to making those decisions feeling at least somewhat informed. There is a pretty big gap there for most people, I think. So I just want to say thank you again. I think the project is incredibly important. I've been listening to the podcast since it started and have really enjoyed listening as this new season starts. So just very briefly about me, I am a mom. I've got 3 kids. They are older now, but the very first time I ran for public office, my kids were 9, 7, and 3. I have 3 boys. They are now almost 22, 20, and 16. And when I say I was immersed in this world my whole life, I'm not exaggerating. The year that I was born, my dad was elected to my local school board. The year that my oldest son was born, my dad was first elected in Franklin County. So being involved both in the community and in politics and government is something that was just an everyday experience in my house. We went to vote with my parents every year. My kids go to vote with us. But that, like I said, I don't think that that is the typical experience for people. So hopefully this conversation will be the start maybe, or the middle or the end of a conversation with all of you as you think about getting more involved and paying attention to the things that are going on. So I am going to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Jamille Jones.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Jamille Jones. So I am the founder and executive director of Pint-Size Protesters, in addition to being city council in Gahanna, and am mother to a really fierce, headstrong 11-year-old sixth grade girls. So solidarity of mothers of tweens right now.
I'm Kelley Stocker. I sit on Westerville City Council, and I also teach government at Westerville South High School. And I have a 7-year-old son.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name's Kristin Sutton. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Metropolitan Columbus. And in my day job, I do government relations for the Columbus Metropolitan Library. So a really great sort of cross-section there of work supporting democracy. And I have an effervescent 5-year-old kindergarten daughter who keeps me on my toes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly Blair, and some history. I've worked in community mental health as an executive director for many years. Recently have left and made a transition into a new career path. Spent majority of my career advocating for the underserved and the marginalized population. Currently working at Mental Health America as Senior Director of Workplace Health. And I have 2 children, 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. I got lots of instructions on how to get here this morning because my son goes to this school. And so he told me all the ways to cut through, which none of that is true.
So we are going to start with you, Kelley. I think you probably have maybe a unique perspective on the questions. So could you talk a little bit about how, from your perspective, what happens in state government impacts families and why families should care about the kinds of things that are happening in state government?
I think what's unique about my position is I see that question from so many different lenses. So I'm a mother, obviously. I'm impacted by things like paid family leave or, medical care, cost of childcare and access to it, especially as, we're all so busy and need to lean into childcare a lot. I also see that through the lens of a teacher and access that my students have, the varying access that they have to those kinds of things, services, needs. And then in my newer position as a city council member, looking out for our whole city. So state policy, when it comes to things that matter to families, is so important. And the people who are there at the state level making those decisions is so important. Whether or not they're going to prioritize families, whether they're going to prioritize, addressing costs, cost of living for families. We know that families get hit the hardest with essentially any government policy that we're talking about. So, advocating at the state level for the things that families care about, for those things like childcare and medical access for all children is so important. And I have spent a little bit of time in my various roles doing that. It's actually one of my favorite things to do is to go to the State House and talk to folks there. And especially in my role as a teacher, because I just see so many students who have varying access to things and families who have very varying needs. And that just has such a huge impact on their education and their future. If they're not being well cared for, or their families are in, more of a crisis mode, then they're not prioritizing education, and then that's going to have a generational impact. So
same question to you, Kristin. Yeah. And I guess I just want to clarify. So I know federal issues grab a lot of people's attention. If I don't watch television, but if you watch television, probably that's kind of the only level of government that you're hearing about. But this year is a statewide election year, and so we're going to focus a little bit more on state issues.
Yeah.
And so that's
you
why
you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, I feel like generally people are most familiar with what's happening at the federal government or in their own local communities, because those are the things that they see the most in the news or that they're seeing the most in their community. But a lot of what happens at the state level really impacts what our local government is allowed to do, and the kinds of policies that they can put in place. I think you may have heard that the city of Columbus has done some work to try to limit access to firearms, but state policymakers are fighting their ability to put those policies in place at the local level. So the state, I think, has a really outsized impact. So I started my career working in the Ohio House of Representatives. And I think that it was really astounding how many people would call into the office thinking that they were calling Congress. And I think there's just such a level of disconnect between what's actually happening and who the decision makers are. So when I think about state policy and how it's impacting families, I think about things like the debate around property taxes. The legislature has passed 4 property tax measures in the last year that reduce collections in a lot of ways for local schools, that allow our county budget commission, which is this obscure body that has historically just allocated dollars that come down from the state, to reduce the amount of money that a levy collects or to not collect it at all if they determine that it's excessive or unnecessary. So that would impact your school, your local township, your public library, all organizations in the community that are doing a lot of good and are sort of filling the gap that government isn't providing. But really sort of taking tools away to support those services. So I think being active and aware in state government is super important. And, it feels like it can be hard to do, but I feel like events like this really help to kind of bridge the gap. And then I'll also give a shout out to the representative. She does town halls, community coffees, and many of the members do. And I really encourage you to get out there and meet with them in those venues. It can feel intimidating, but I think events like this help to make them feel more accessible. They're moms and neighbors and community members just like you, and the way that they can shape the decisions that they make are by hearing from you and the things that you care about and feel passionately about. And you can also learn what's happening at the state level. So lots of great ways to get involved, and I think today is kind of a good entry point for that.
Same question to you, Kim. From your perspective, how do decisions made at the state level, how do those decisions impact families?
Yeah. So in my experience, and predominantly working in the Medicaid population, that has been a significant impact of understanding benefits, even just the change that we have proceeded through in terms of how to get Medicaid and the process of that, and then the limitations that create that, of that you need to have internet to get Medicaid. You need to have technology to get Medicaid. You no longer can just walk into your local job and family services and get a face-to-face contact. And so as we make advancements or make changes, we forget about the barriers and access to care. And so a lot of my work has been done in the rural communities and how some of these state decisions get made based on the 3 C's, Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland, but we forget about the rest of the communities. And so really thinking about when we make decisions, who's it going to impact and how it's going to impact everyone, not just our 3 C's. As being a Columbus resident, right? But still, we need to be mindful of, we could go 15 minutes down the road and be in very rural and access issues.
To you, Jamille.
Yeah.
Same question.
Same question. Ditto a lot of what's said. I think what's important is the connection between your local government to the state, right? Like a lot of the things has been said that your local government is trying to do for you can be successful or be shot down at the state level. And so it's unfortunately, and I know we all don't have a lot of time, it's like you have to be watching both, right? Because the two often don't talk, right? Like as a local elected, I talk to Rep. Beryl, but like that's a lucky partnership that we have. But on many other cases, like the local and the state aren't. So being engaged in both and understanding like the path of things that happen for you locally and sort of what that means next at the state level is also really, really important. And I'm sure this will come up more in our conversation, but so much of what's happening isn't impacting like just us, it's impacting our children and generations after that. And so it also means like when we talk about how is it impacting your family is like having that conversation with your family about how that is impacting us and what that means for everyone here and what is each of our roles, regardless of your age or those types of things in your family, what we can do to impact it. So it really does become like a family discussion, knowing that many of these things have trickle down effects and doesn't just impact this moment, but future generations as well.
I think we're going to start with Kristin on the next question. So you talked about kind of the impact that those decisions have on families. Again, from your perspective, what do you see as the barriers for people in getting involved in those decisions that get made, particularly at the state level, or maybe in comparison to state versus local versus federal?
Yeah, so I think the biggest barrier is this feeling that you need to know everything before you can speak up. I certainly have that imposter syndrome sometimes where I have a perspective on a piece of an issue, but I feel like I don't know everything there is to know about it. And so maybe my voice isn't going to make a difference. And I think that that's just really not true at all. Your lived experience and the way that you approach an issue might be very unique and offer some really helpful insights to our policymakers. And truly, they want to hear from you. So I think from my perspective, this feeling of needing to know everything is the biggest barrier. And then I would also say knowing how to engage. When I was in college, I worked with an organization not too dissimilar from the League of Women Voters. We were nonpartisan. We did voter registration, and we also advocated for higher education policy issues at the State House. And we actually had the League come in and teach us how to lobby because we didn't know. But one of the members that we met with said in our meeting, "Were you going to come in and testify in committee?" And our group was like, "You can do that? How do you do that? Like, how do you even figure out what is the process for that?" I didn't even know that regular people could do that. And so I think asking the questions too of our elected leaders to figure out, like, I have a perspective on this and it may be different from yours, but help me understand the process for my voice to be heard and to make a difference.
Am I next?
Yeah, you're next, Kim.
So yes to imposter syndrome, which we could spend days on talking, right? I think time and knowledge and then courage is those kind of pieces to complement what Kristin said. First of all, I want to just I'll give yourself a pat on the back for showing up today, because that means like you said yes to something. You said yes to something that was important to you, which probably means you feel you said no to something else. And that as we talk about bridging the gap, being okay with saying yes and saying no. And I think just having the courage to make those choices and know you made that choice is one of the things of just accepting it. So the question was about what are the barriers, and I think time and then the courage to use your voice. And it doesn't have to be a big voice. It can be a small voice. It can be in just one-on-one conversations, because that I think has a trickle effect of impact.
You haven't answered it.
I don't think I started, but I wanted to add that I think one of the barriers too is just overwhelm, right? Like there are so many different things going on and so many different things that we can be knowledgeable about that it's often easier to, especially when you're like, I'm trying to raise a family and I'm trying to just, keep people fed and things like that. It can sometimes be easier to disconnect. I mean, just yesterday I had someone call and ask me about an issue that I was like, oh, I hadn't heard of that one. So I don't know how to respond. And so I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying about like, find what's a passion for you or what is really impactful for you and share your perspective and how it impacts you. You don't have to know all of the other things that are going on. You don't have to go in, if you're going to go and provide testimony, talk about all of the things that are happening. It's just find your lane, your piece of the puzzle and kind of how you can contribute, but also like take a step back sometimes too. When we talk about like that overwhelm and it's easier, or sometimes we just need that peace of mind to step away and just focus on being a mom, being a good community member. Like that's okay too. I often say like with our organization that we are preparing everybody to get engaged so that we can have that step forward, that step back. So when you get worn out, I can step forward. When I need a rest, we all know how to do it so that we can truly have that community care and that we're taking care of each other. But that means everyone has to be knowledgeable so that when others need to sit out, there's somebody that can carry that load.
Yeah, to build on the idea of overwhelm and also like the barrier of knowing how to do things. I have a colleague who she cares a lot about things, but she's just not. She relies on me to tell her like we need to show up. This is important. This is a time we need to show up, and she kind of trusts me to like filter out the most important things because she's very busy, and she just is not a politically minded person, but she does care a lot. And so, if you're in this room, you care a lot too, and maybe you could be that person for somebody else. I think like kind of spreading the knowledge or thinking, who do I know who's a great person? Who, maybe I could invite to this important event or whatever the case may be. So like starting to think of ourselves as leaders, even if we're just at the very beginning, it was a barrier for me when I kind of started on this journey. I did not go from 0 to I'm running for office in one step. I found things that I cared about and I said yes to them. And that kind of led to the next step. So speaking to that idea of overwhelm, not thinking like I need to go out and solve this problem by myself today. It's just find that one thing that can lead to the next thing, that one thing that might make a small impact and then it leads to something else. The other thing that I hear a lot from people like my colleague is that they just don't feel like their voice really makes a difference. So when we say like, call your representatives, right? It's like, well, maybe my representatives are on the complete opposite side of a particular issue and I don't trust them and they're not going to listen to me, right? Long time ago, I actually worked in Senator Voinovich's casework office in Columbus, and I was the person that answered those phones. And I will tell you that it was my job to listen, to record, not everything they said, but if there was a particular bill or something, I made tick marks. This many people called today in support of this issue. This many people called today against the issue. And then that data got given to a staffer who delivered it to the senator. And so they do, even if they're on the opposite side of an issue, it doesn't mean they're magically going to jump over to the other side. But it is data that they look at to say, okay, this is what people are calling about this week. This is what people care about. And it could push them to maybe, reach across the aisle and maybe concede a little bit, maybe compromise a little bit, because they know it's something that a lot of people are driven by and care about. So understanding back to that process and like how things work, as you get to understand those things, you can see the way that your voice does actually make a difference. And I think that's very motivating.
Some of you have kind of touched on this, but do you have any other thoughts, additional thoughts about how people can overcome the barriers that prevent them from being engaged? And I was going to start with Kim, but if it gets too confusing, you can start however.
So I think the first thing that comes up to me is to just name what you're feeling and then figure out if there's a way to reframe. So we mentioned imposter syndrome, which comes up for all of us. And that's really like feeling we're not good enough, feeling we don't belong there, feeling like we don't have a voice, and then reframing it. So anytime I experience it, I think about like, okay, so my imposter syndrome is getting angry, and I need to embrace that because that gives me passion for what I'm going to be. And it means like when I feel discomfort, that means I'm actually growing. And if I feel comfortable, then I'm not growing. So to me, it's how your thought process and how can you reframe. And if you're withholding back, then that means that you're losing the opportunity to help others.
I would also say, take some of the imposter syndrome too, and just the being afraid or the courage is like, take a buddy, you might be that buddy for someone else. So like if you are feeling nervous, you're here, you've taken that first step, or maybe there's somebody watching you, so it's like we can write letters together, we can call together, we can go give testimonies together, we can do the protest together, whatever that is. Having somebody who can kind of encourage you along in that as well. I think, oftentimes that young people are that, like, one of the barriers that we didn't exactly talk about is that like we are moms and our kids are doing so many things. And, it's like, well, do you have to get a babysitter to go be civically engaged? No, bring your kid with you, and my child is sometimes the one where I'm like, oh God, I don't have the energy to go and fight this fight again, or go to that protest again, or go to the state house. And she's like, but Mom, come on, like we got to do this. Or I already made my sign, I'm ready to go. So like whoever your champion or your cheerleader is, can be a really good, to get over that barrier. It's like the gym buddy, like I don't want to go, but your friend is already up with coffee at the gym. So it's like, who is that person for you in this work too?
Yeah, I love, and second, the comment about just bringing your kids along. My favorite thing in the world is bringing my son, everywhere I can. Because it's just such a great civic education for him. And yeah, it sometimes can make it a little harder. It takes a little more energy, especially depending on how old your kid is or how many kids you have. That might not be realistic for every event in every situation, but you can bring your kids, I think, to a lot more than you think you can, and that they're just part of the package, and I think in a way we can even start to, normalize that. Maybe there haven't been a lot of kids in this space throughout history, and maybe that's one of the things that we can work to change, So I love that. I had a thought, and then I had another thought, and then I was just going to go back to saying just one step at a time, So if you're in the Westerville area, we have so many opportunities to get civically engaged. It's one of my favorite things about our city. And just find one place. Like we have this great group here in Westerville, Sustainable Westerville, shameless plug for them. They need a board member. If you care about sustainability, maybe I can serve as a board member. It's not, they're all busy too, the people who are already on that board and probably any other board. And so it's not as much as you might think. And those types of groups, like they will work around your schedule. And, maybe that's something you can do. So that's just one example. But find a group that speaks to you and say, how can I get involved? Maybe I can start going to their meetings or one of their community events, or maybe they do need people to help out, volunteer, even if it's not, a board position. So just kind of one step at a time, I think, is a great way to overcome that barrier.
I feel like this was a really wonderful segue because now I can make a plug for the League of Women Voters of Metro Columbus. So our organization is over 100 years old, and while the word women is in our name, we're an organization that's proud to be open to all genders. We welcome everyone into the league and think that we all have a role to play in defending democracy and empowering voters. The work that we do is really multifaceted. So we have a voter services committee that's going out to community festivals and the parades and community events and fairs, helping to register people to vote, helping people check their registration status, helping them look up where their polling location is, helping connect them with the documents that they might need to secure the ID that you're now required to have to go to the polls and vote. So that work is really rewarding and fulfilling. We also have an education and advocacy committee that's really working on providing information to the community about the kinds of things that are happening in government. We recently had a misinformation and disinformation panel where we talked a lot about what is the difference, how do you spot it, what do you do when you encounter misinformation and disinformation, what are you responsible for in that moment. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that's looking at both our own internal policies and the way that we're creating barriers to engagement within our own organization. But then they're also doing a lot of external work as well to be able to say, what is the role of DEI in the community today? We've heard a lot of backlash from that phrase from many levels of government. They held an event last year where they looked at DEI through that misinformation, disinformation lens. We had people from Disability Rights Ohio, from the Human Services Chamber, and from a handful of other organizations where they talked a lot about what do we lose when we don't talk about diversity, and who do we actually mean when we're talking about it. We have a speakers bureau where we have people who are trained to go out into the community and talk about the importance of voting and getting involved, or if there's a particular issue that the leagues endorse, like redistricting reform. We train you to go out in the community and talk to groups like this, or to your Chamber of Commerce, or to your civic association. We hold candidate forums where we provide a nonpartisan panel sort of conversation like this, where we're asking candidates, what do you believe in? What are the issues that you feel most passionate about? And giving the community opportunities to ask. And then I think another way of kind of overcoming those barriers, we also publish a voter guide every year where we ask all of the candidates who are running for office the same list of questions. And then we publish those online at vote411.org or in our paper voter guide, which will be available for the general election at your library or at your coffee shop or wherever they may be provided. And those are really great tools for you to find nonpartisan, unbiased information. The league doesn't support a party or a candidate. We support the electoral process, and we support democracy and ensuring that people feel empowered and educated when they go to the polls. So those resources, I think, can provide a really great baseline. But you know what? We may not be the organization for you. You might feel more passionately about getting involved with a progressives group or a conservative group or a group that's fighting for a particular issue, like education reform. There are so many groups that are out there, and if we're not the one for you, we are happy to help get you connected with a group that is for you, because we see the value in having your voice as part of the conversation.
Kristin, along those lines, can you maybe talk a little bit about how being part of a group gives you the ability to have your voice heard, even when you might not have the time or the ability or knowledge to do that directly?
Yeah, so I mean, I think being part of the group is really valuable in a lot of different ways. So one, if you don't know about the issue, there's somebody else in the organization who does and who is looking into that for us and building our policy positions. And so there are so many opportunities to learn from people within the group. Also, you have the opportunity, right, to buddy up. You're never alone. I think others have talked about this concept, right, where you feel more comfortable when you're doing something with somebody else. And when you're a member of the league, right, you have hundreds of people who are behind you and supporting you in the work. And I also think being part of an organization sort of raises your voice up a little more, because when you come and talk as a member of the league or a member of pint-sized protesters, that I think lends a little more credence to what you're saying, because you're not just representing yourself, which there is a lot of value in, but you're representing this cause and this group of people who are organized and who are informed and who are voting and sharing what your group collectively believes to be really important. And I think that can make a big difference.
We're back to Jamille. I just want to echo, I think it was the comment maybe several of you made about bringing kids with you into spaces. And just for myself, I very distinctly remember, I think I mentioned the year that my oldest son was born. My dad was on the ballot here in Franklin County, and I was part of his campaign team as treasurer, went to weekly campaign meetings, and I was a breastfeeding mom. And my son came with me and sat through campaign meetings, and it was all like, it felt awkward, and it felt like I was doing something. I felt in my head like am I intentionally trying to make people uncomfortable? But it was what needed to happen for me to be able to be in that space. And I guess I just want to echo, maybe now things have changed enough that it doesn't feel uncomfortable, but I'm guessing it still does in some spaces and at some times. And if that is a barrier that is ever holding you back from going somewhere, from doing something, I just want to encourage you to push yourself to do it anyway, because for both men and women, for all parents, the more that we normalize having kids in those spaces, the less uncomfortable it's going to feel for somebody else. And the truth is that the voices of parents, the voices of people who are maybe caretakers of parents or caretakers of grandparents or raising somebody else's kids, like those are the voices that are most needed in these conversations. And oftentimes those are the busiest people who have the most barriers that they feel like get in the way of them participating. So I just wanted to double down on those comments about bringing kids with you into spaces. Did you want?
Yeah.
For sure. Yes.
We're all like, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think this is just so relevant because I couldn't remember what time this started. And so I Googled the event and I found a group on Facebook that had shared the flyer, and someone had posted, I really wanted to come, but my childcare fell through. I don't know if you're here. I hope you are. But can I bring my child with me? And the group responded, it's an event for moms, so I assume yes. And that is so truly the answer, right? Like, we want your kid here. And you know what? Like, my daughter will be the first one who's like up, like running through the aisles, and she has ADHD, so she can't like stay seated. But you know, we want your child here because like, I want my daughter to see me doing this work and to know that this is something that I feel really passionately about. And I want this to be part of how she's growing up. I want her to not get to my age and feel like I don't really know how to get involved. I want this to just be the way that she has grown up and have it be a normal part of her life.
Yeah. Kim, did you want to?
Yeah.
So to complement that, but also to kind of flip the coin, is also letting your children lead. Having two headstrong adolescents and allowing them to lead the advocacy piece and letting them find the space, which is really developmentally appropriately, right? We're talking about government teachers, right? Get them involved, like let them come up with that. And then you be the supporter. That I would also say is leading by example, but also supporting the next generation having a voice, because that's the only way we can survive is if the next generation continues to make a difference. And so if you're a parent of teenagers or even young ones, asking what they're interested in, so that you don't always have to be modeling and being on stage, but letting them lead. Like, what do you want to do? What means something to you? And empowering them to start finding that internally and then supporting it.
Another comment that occurred to me too is like putting my government teacher hat on. I think that something we can do better is thinking about civic education the same way we think about religious education, if you do that, and academic education. Like, how am I providing my child with their civic education? What do I want their civic education to look like? We can't just rely on the schools to do that. That's something we can model at home. And I think that that's not normal these days, and something that I think we should normalize, and start thinking about and cultivating for our kids. What values do I want them to grow up with?
And now it's my time for a shameless plug, because everything that Kim just mentioned is what our organization is taking the lead from your child. And so, like, if you see us on social media, we're speaking to the adult because we assume that it's the adult there and we influence. But when you get into person with us, it is about our kids and what they are interested in. And I love that you mentioned, like, sort of reframing civic education, because it also is about teaching them that there's not one way to do it, and that whatever their skill, talent, passion is, it can be used for good. I might be an artist, I might be a writer, I might be the quiet person that, is in the background. Like, there's a role for everybody. And so just as important as reading and writing and arithmetic and all of those things is, teaching them civic engagement, but that there's not one size fits all, and that it's beyond just voting. It is all of these pieces of puzzle. It's community care, and what does that look like? And that no matter what you are good at, and even if you're not good at it, if you want to do it, there's a spot for you.
And that goes for adults too. I love
Yes,
what you said, like, if you're an artist or a writer, like, maybe you don't want to go testify in committee because that's like not what your space is. But maybe you can create like a really great graphic for the organization, or work on comms or something else. So yes for grown-ups too.
Yeah.
So one of the other barriers, I don't think that has come up yet, but one of the barriers that I hear about a lot is people hesitating to talk about issues because they are afraid of conflict. So maybe you grew up in a house where you were told we don't talk about religion, politics, and sex. Maybe you didn't grow up in a house like that, but it just sometimes feels uncomfortable for you to start a conversation or participate in a conversation because conflict is something that you worry about. So can you talk a little bit about how you can talk with neighbors, with friends, with community members about issues in a way that is respectful and constructive and can kind of get you over the barrier of the conflict anxiety?
Yeah. I'm a horrible person to start this with, because I'm not a great model of it, just because I'm really passionate. But my day job is DEI, and kudos that League of Women's Voters is still using the words and talking about it and doing the work. So love that. But in my 9 to 5, that is what I have to do, is ensure that we're having the conversations and doing it from a respectful way. And really, how we approach that is at the core of all of this is we're talking about each of our reality and humanity. And mine might be different from yours, but it's important that we all have that we all have that sense of belonging, that we all feel like we and our families can be safe to do the things that we want. And how do we find that common ground in the conversation? And if we don't find the common ground or we're on different sides of the issues, well, just then recognizing that, like, this is my reality. This is my life. And I'm not asking you to understand or think differently or change yours, but I'm asking you to see the person in front of you. I'm asking you to honor the dignity and worth of this person is here, just like I would do for you. And so I'm sharing my perspective and what I think and believe. I want to hear yours. Maybe we'll come to the middle. Maybe that will shift a perspective. Oftentimes, like, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but like, it doesn't. So we also shouldn't approach these conversations as I'm going to change your mind. Like, I'm really good and persuasive. I'm going to get you to come to the other end of the issue. 99% of the times, that's not scientific, so don't quote me on that, but like, you're not. But what you're saying is, can we come a little closer to the middle, or can I at least get you to see me? Like, see me just like you want to be seen in this moment as well.
I also like completely crumble inside when I think about conflict. I've met almost nobody who's like, I love conflict, you know, I can't wait to get into a fight about politics with someone. And so I think understanding that that's normal, I used to kind of hide behind that. And I would think, oh, I would never run for office because like I crumble under scrutiny and I don't want to have to talk to people about political issues who aren't my friends and who I don't know like what page they're on. And I hid behind that, and I realized it was something I could overcome. So one of the smartest things I did when I decided to run for office was get a good therapist. And I had needed one for a while, and I just didn't find one I liked. And I was like, I prioritized finding and establishing someone early on because I knew this is going to be really hard. And she talked to me about it, and she continues to talk to me about it in a way that's almost like we talk about how it's like exposure therapy. And it is, I would share with her, one of the big things that I was concerned about during campaigning was the candidate night that the chamber does. And I just had built it up, and I was so nervous about it. And she was like, it's exposure therapy, it's hard, but you're doing it. And that was like a turning point for me, I think. I was like, oh, people always tell you like, you can do hard things. And it's just a phrase, but like, it's true. So I think understanding that it is very normal to shy away from conflict, especially around topics like politics and religion. But I really think that's why we are where we are in some ways, because we have shied away as a society from having that constructive, respectful discourse. When you don't have an opportunity to practice that skill, it goes away. So now we're at this place where we don't have those respectful conversations, and we don't know how to anymore. So I think thinking of it in terms of this is normal. Nobody likes to do this. It's going to take a little bit of energy on my part. Start one step at a time. Have one conversation and like go in acknowledging this is going to be difficult. I don't want to do this. I don't want to knock on a door and talk to a stranger about politics. But it's important, and I can do that, and kind of going from there.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I'll add our mission at the League is empowering voters and defending democracy. And for over 100 years, that was not a political statement. That was just the reality of the work that we were trying to do. And I think that in the current political climate, that is viewed as a partisan mission, when our organization is made up of individuals across the political spectrum who believe in ensuring that our community has access to the ballot, and that they feel like they know what people stand for when they go to vote. And so a lot of the conversations that we're having in the league are about how these should be shared in common values among all of us, that anybody who is eligible to register to vote ought to be registered, and that the barriers that stand in the way for them to get to the ballot need to be addressed and removed. And that can be really difficult. It shouldn't be, but it can be when people come from the issue from different perspectives. I think that there is value in debating without fighting, and talking about issues that you feel really passionately about, knowing that you're not going to change someone's mind. And then, I also think that there's value, right, in getting out of the echo chamber, because so many of us are surrounded by people who think and feel and act the same way that we do. And how will you ever create a well-rounded view of the issue that you care about and be able to respond to some of the challenges that are coming from other places if you don't know why somebody might believe what they believe or why they're approaching the issue the way that they do? So I think there's a lot of value in talking with people who don't think the way that you do, because if nothing else, at the end of the day, that helps to expand your own awareness of the issue and the way that you can talk about it in the future.
So just to piggyback on that, I think my approach is that people just want to be heard, like as Jamille said, like want to be seen and heard, and humanizing it, and that it's not one side versus another. And so to put my therapist hat on, but to see how you can actually put the issue in, not between each other, but next to each other, like so in front of you. So instead of being on two different sides, helping to understand each other's perspective. And so to me, when I go into those conflict high situations, I have like 3 phrases that I'm going to lean into that I use when I know I'm getting escalated. Because I think if we all look at what we really don't want to do is lose our crap, right? Like we don't want to cry, we don't want to get angry, right? Like that usually we come back down to the fear with conflict, or we don't want to feel different, we don't want to feel rejection. So I focus on what are 3 things I can do, like I can say to pause myself, so that I don't overreact. And so whatever those things are, but you can lean into that piece. So I always have it with me, like, help me understand, I'm curious about, tell me more. Because those are things, if I listen, people want to be heard and you need to know why. And if you understand why, then they're more likely to hear your perspective. And if we understand why people are coming from different perspectives, we're more likely to come to that middle than opposing versus just sticking our heels into the ground on our perspective.
Just want to take a minute to remind everybody that if you do think of a question, there are cards in the back there, and you can write out your question if you don't want to ask it. But also, I'm going to keep reading through the questions I have. If you have questions and you do feel comfortable, you are welcome to raise your hand too. Just want to remind everybody of that. So I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but can any of you think of an example of a time that was not specifically a setting where you knew was going to be a political conversation? So not when you're knocking on the door, not when you're in a meeting, like a meeting for pint-sized protesters or League of Women Voters. Maybe you're at a PTA meeting, maybe you're grocery shopping and you run into somebody, maybe you're outside hanging out with the neighbors, or you're at book club. Can any of you think of an example of a time where the conversation just naturally, something related to values came up and you were able to have the conversation, not necessarily in a partisan way, but the kind of conversation that people think of as political values-based in a setting where it was not expected? And how did you navigate that successfully or not successfully?
For me, it sometimes happens when I'm with my grandmother, and we're just like having lunch together. And my grandmother's, she's in a lot of ways, politically, she's on the other side from me, but she also agrees with a lot of things that I think. And so I think she's just so attached to her label, because it's always been what she is. And so we'll just be having lunch, and read something in the newspaper the other day, and she'll just say the most off the wall thing. And my family does not, like, we just don't talk about anything consequential ever. We're very surface level. And so typically I just kind of gloss over it. But more recently, I've taken those opportunities to try to lean in. And of course, I want to be respectful. I'm not going to yell at her. I'm not like, what are you talking about, Grandma? So coming at that opportunity, like very similar to what you said, like with curiosity, what makes you think that? It had something to do with public education. So that's kind of my wheelhouse. And so, I was like, that's really not the experience that I have as a public educator, and that thing that you're talking about, this is the impact that it has on me. And it was fun. And she was like, oh, okay. I mean, nothing groundbreaking. She's not going to change the way that she votes, but it was a conversation that we were able to have that I felt good about. And I thought it was a productive conversation, not because anything changed, but because we were able to just have that conversation, and it was respectful and had a positive outcome.
I would say it doesn't happen a lot, but what I found is really helpful. So, I'm going through that in the day job right now where, all of the things that we're talking about has a weight on people. And you don't let any of that weight go when you go into your work or your community or other things. You bring that with you and you're not as productive. And in my day job, I'm having those associates say that to me, like, there's a lot going on. And then I try to talk about it with my leader and my teams. And then and their leaders go, but then it gets political and I don't know what to do. And I'm just squashing it down. And so it comes to that curiosity, but the question that I've transitioned to is, okay, so what is it that you need right now? You all are on different sides of the issues, but what is it that you need? And in these situations, it's often people going, I just want someone to understand that I'm not okay. Like, I'm on this issue, you're on that side of it, but I just want them to understand that, like, I'm not okay, and that when I come into work, please don't act like nothing's happening out here and expect me to just be this machine and keep producing. And so that's been really helpful in the elected official situation, because I sit with people all the time who are on different issues. I had a constituent hour, and the one person that showed up is the biggest antagonist in our community. And I knew it wasn't going to be a great conversation. And I literally was just like, hey, what is it that you need right now? What do we have? What do we have in common? We both love Reese's peanut butter cups. So cool. I have Reese's peanut butter cups in my bag all the time when I know that she's going to show up. But I do, and it's helpful. But that question of, what is it that you need? Because when the tensions heighten, right? And we cry and we get angry, and it's like you think that you're trying to change your mind, but if you just take away the issue and say, what is it that is happening right here? I just want to be heard. I just want to be heard. And so if we can bring that into the situation, I think it's helpful to diffuse as much as we can.
So I think it has shown up in many different ways for me. Work is definitely one, and knowing that I work with a lot of the younger generation who don't really know what their civic responsibility is, or even understand the importance of that piece. So just modeling some of that piece. But I also have found that it's happened on the soccer field or in any type of group population where I'm like, something comes up, and holding space, and also to what do they need, but what are they going to do about it? Not but, and I try to get rid of that but that keeps on coming up, but and what are you going to do about it? Like, what do you need, and what are you going to do about it? And putting the responsibility back on the person, that is not your job, because as moms, we have this just desire to fix everything or to resolve everything, to have a solution for everything. So what do they need, and what are you going to do about it?
I'm trying to organize my thoughts around this, because I feel like I've been the victim of like taking the rage bait before, and that's like not very productive. a la my brother-in-law. And I had this boyfriend in college whose family was but I won't go there. I think, a lot of what everyone said is the right approach in terms of a specific example that I can think of, right? I think that there are some times when you're talking with people and because of maybe where you are or what the type of event is, people might assume a level of sameness and start sharing opinions with you that really don't sit. And it creates this really uncomfortable situation where you're thinking to yourself, ooh, that's really not something that I believe. And it feels uncomfortable to say, hey, actually, no, that's not what my opinion is. And I think there's so much value in sharing that with someone. I think that it helps to sort of have them take the pause as well to say like, okay, I'm sharing this opinion that I've assumed is the opinion of everybody here, but really it's not. And to have, I think, something that we talked about before is the courage to speak up and say, hey, that's not what I think. Tell me more about why you feel that way. I think there's a lot of value in that. Not letting a comment go just because it's easier and sharing what you believe in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, to the point about civic education being another thing that we need to recognize alongside academic education and other kinds of education, pushing ourselves to, I guess, normalize the idea of leaning in even when it feels uncomfortable to disagree with somebody politely, to make sure that not just are they being seen and heard, but that we also are a human who has opinions and has experiences that deserve to be seen and heard. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So we talked at the beginning about how a lot of times it's federal things, issues, news that catches people's attention because that's what media tends to cover. But can any of you give an example or some examples of issues that we might be feeling stressed about, that we think is a federal issue, but is actually something that we could lean in on at the state level or at the local level and make an impact on that issue?
I think education reform is a really big one. And I don't want to say too much because I feel I don't want to steal your thunder, Bright, but, Ohio's funding formula for schools was declared unconstitutional in like 1994 or something. We all went through school during a period where it was unconstitutional, and the state has continued to work on that. But I do think there's this perception that the U.S. Department of Education has some role to play in school equity. And that's, I think, very much an issue that we can be addressing both at the state level and in our own communities. So that is a really big one. I feel like there are so many, so I'll just kind of pass it on.
Yeah, I don't want to be redundant, but I was going to say education, because it's you see what's happening at the federal, and then the state are trying to do similar things or are being moved or inspired to do things by the federal. And then people are then coming into your local school board meetings inspired by the state and by the federal. And so on the smallest level, not small, meaning inconsequential, but on the local level with your schools and how you can impact is, showing up at a school board meeting and, giving your perspective when there are probably a ton of people giving an opposite one. How can you be a part of the PTA or getting on committees for the superintendent or helping in a classroom? All of those things I think are super, super helpful. I'm, of course, coming blank on all of the other examples because it feels like the biggest one is education, because it truly is just like a trickle down effect right now. And, we think about funding. So again, federal, state, but then it's even getting down to levies, and, what's happening at a federal level is impacting whether our local levies pass or not. And there's a big blur at all of the different levels in education right now. And there is so much we can do locally to impact.
I missed the first part of that question. Was it specific policy?
Yes, or issue. So what can you give an example or some examples of issues that people think are just federal, that they're feeling stressed about, or they're feeling some emotion about, where they could actually lean in at the state level or the local level or both and have some impact.
Okay. Yeah, I think an issue that people don't really think a lot about is local control, which is, I mean, something I've learned a lot more about since running for a local office. But there are things that we might want to see for our community. And I think this was brought up earlier too, but the state gets in the way of us being able to do that. And so local control really is just the ability to kind of mold your individual community the way that you want. So if you really care a lot about something, you know, you can push your local representatives to do something about it. But if we're cut off by the state, then and I think that can be applicable to a lot of different things. And so maybe leaning into learning a little bit more about local control and calling your state level representatives to let them know that you want your local communities to be able to do more.
More has come to me. I'm thinking of things like access to reproductive health care, support for transgender individuals. Those are all things that are happening at the state level, policies being passed. We hear so much about it from the federal level, but the things that actually impact us in our community are policies that are passed at the state level. Things like drug policy, like access to your THC, like seltzer, right? Like there's federal drug policy, but then, you know, that was Governor DeWine's choice. So, you know, there are lots of things.
Voting.
Okay. And then, yes, voting. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about.
I wasn't going to let you know.
Right. We control the way that elections happen in Ohio, but there are lots of ways that the federal government interferes or inserts themselves into that. Recently, our Secretary of State shared our voter roll information with the executive office at the federal level, with this idea that there would be a huge federal almost takeover of our election process, whereby there would be this like national roll of registered voters who would receive voting information from the U.S. Postal Service, and it would be overseen by the Department of Justice to ensure that there's election integrity. And this is all happening at a time where we hear so much narrative around voter fraud from the federal level, but in Ohio and in most places everywhere, that just is not the case. Voter fraud does not exist in the way that I think we're told so often that it does. And so you hear from the federal level that, you know, there are dead people voting, and we have people who are here illegally who are voting. And while I'm sure, right, that happens, it's not happening at the level that would warrant the amount of attention that it receives.
And elections are still controlled at the state level.
Right.
There are lots of state laws that impact the way that we vote. And so while you may hear a lot being threatened or being said at the federal level, there is lots of engagement to happen that is needed at the state level on those issues too. I am going to kind of combine three questions that touch on a similar issue. So, how can moms connect with local leaders without attending formal meetings? How can parents support causes with limited time? And then I know that there may be a lot of moms in this room, and the conversation, we've been talking about moms, but there's a lot of load that is on the shoulders of moms. So what are things that we can do to help spread that pressure, that load off of just the shoulders of moms and on to dads, to non-parents, to others? So whatever pieces of those three questions.
Have our elected officials talk about how you can talk to them.
So reach out. I mean, it's probably a little easier on your local than the state, but just send an email. Like I have things that I want to say or share with an elected official, with you as my council or school board. I can't make it to meetings. When can we connect? Keep an eye out for many local electeds have, times informal where you could pop by. I'm leaving here, I'm going to our local coffee shop, and I sit there for an hour, and the community knows that I'm there and they can come by and talk. So those happen often as well. So just reach out and say that you're willing to talk. It's easy locally, like I said. If there's someone on the state level who happens to be your neighbor, you can also that works too. If you happen to know someone elected is in your community, there's that common ground, so it helps to reach out that way. There was the other part of the question that I was like, I have a response for that. It was
sharing.
Sharing. So I think it's a matter of so like they tell you when you run for office, like you have your cabinet and then your kitchen cabinet. So the people who help you at home. But I take that as that's not just as an elected, that like as a mom, we need our kitchen cabinet. They say it takes a village, and it literally does. And so and I'm not good at this. Like I'm working on that with my new therapist that I also got when I ran for office, is just understanding that like you have to ask for help. So knowing how to do that, when to do that, knowing when you need the rest or when you need to take a seat back. Also knowing when your priorities are like, yes, I want to fight the world's problem, but I also really need to be at my kid's dance recital, and that's more important to me right now, and I'm going to do that. But I do really think it's a matter of like, what is that support system and taking things off of your plate, making sure the people around you that love you the most know what you're really passionate about. Like, I left home with a husband today who's on full dad duty because like he knows the things that I'm doing today, like I'm going to be really frustrated if I don't get to do them. And so it's like, he's like, I got it. I got the hat. Right. And it's having that conversation, having that support system around you to be able to flex as you need, and just knowing that we don't have to solve it all. And I'm preaching to myself right now, but like I don't remember who said it, but as moms, we want to solve everything. We can't. It is impossible. So just knowing where you can make the biggest impact, and that might just be reading the bedtime story that night. Like, and if that's all you accomplish is just being a really great mom, raising a good, kind human who contributes to the world, like that's civic engagement too. Like you don't have to write a letter. You don't have to go and do all of the things. If you show up at the ballot box and, support raising good humans that do those things, check. You've done what you are supposed to contribute.
Yeah, well, in terms of getting a hold of your local officials, email, it's a great, easy thing you can do from home. And actually, if you come to a meeting, it's great to go to a meeting and engage in the public comments or just to hear what's going on. But if you actually want a dialogue, email is actually more effective because there's no dialogue at the meetings. So that email allows, it allows for busy schedules. Also, I can't speak for all electeds, but if somebody invited me out to coffee, I would definitely go. I'd be really excited. So, that kind of allows you to do it on your terms when you're available. So yeah, I second those ways of engaging. And that's something that's unique about local officials because they're so much closer. They are your neighbors. They're very accessible. For spreading out the burden, I'm not the person to ask. As we sit here, I'm freaking out because I realized I forgot to send the birthday flyer to my husband, who is supposed to be taking my kid to a birthday party. And I forgot my phone also. So I can't even hey guys, I got to send this text really quick. But I'm hoping that I know. And I'm like, tell myself that, but I'm still panicking a little. I'm like, he does have the parent's phone number. So I'm hoping that that he can problem solve and reach out to the parent and say like, hey, where's this birthday party? I did tell him it was 30 minutes away. So he knows what time he needs to leave by. I just don't know if he knows where he's going. So
we have help.
Yes. Oh, yes, that would be great. Do you have? Okay, I was thinking like,
That's your village right there.
there you go. See, I asked for help and I got it. Maybe I'm better. Maybe I'm better than I thought I was. But I mean, part of it, that is a very mom thing, right? Like we are the house managers, and when you're not so good at spreading that out, you get in situations where you literally are the only person who can handle things because the other people in your life don't know how because you've never delegated that. So something I'm working on.
I love that. I don't know if you have been the subject of this like targeted Instagram ad, but I have seen this article come up multiple times now. I think it's maybe from The Atlantic, where it talks about how this idea that like everybody has like a big group of friends, or that women have this like big group of like a girl squad, is like not actually the reality for most people, because those relationships become harder and harder to maintain as we get older. So having a village is super important, but we're also in a time when people are more isolated than they've ever been before. And so I think one of the ways that we can start to kind of like spread that load or build those relationships are by getting involved in organizations that are doing work that you're interested in or that you feel really passionately about. So whether that is something in the civic engagement space, or that's like joining a book club in your neighborhood, or volunteering at your food pantry, those are all ways to build community support, civic engagement, and also kind of help you figure out who are those people in this stage of your life who are going to be able to support you. And then I think what you ended on is so important about you can't expect people to step up and do the work if you don't ever let them know that you need them to do the work. I am guilty as well of thinking that some of the things in the invisible load are quite obvious and not that invisible, but not everybody approaches it in that same way. And so naming it and asking for help, I think, really, really important. And then the last thing I would say is feeling empowered to say no, and letting no mean no, or letting no mean not right now. If you need to focus on the things that your family needs or that you need to be safe, healthy, productive, then allow that be the answer for now.
So this hits home because my husband had knee replacement surgery yesterday, and I said yes to not care, like here, and not caring for him today, which I'd much rather be here. After that, I got fired multiple times yesterday for managing the pain, whatever. But to the piece of like, I thought, I could do this. I can be back for PT. I can take my son to his soccer game, and I can pick up my daughter wherever she socially is. And then saying, no, I don't have to do all those things, and asking for help, even though, which is really hard for me to ask for help and to take my cape off and say, I don't have to do everything. And then realizing, like, leaning into the fact that by showing up here, I'm modeling to the people I ask for help the importance of showing up for the things that matter, even if they're on a whole different plane, like even if they're politically differently, or those pieces, like showing that I can use my voice. The other thing was about spreading the load to me is engaging in those older adults who need a place of purpose. They're no longer working. They no longer have like a need at this point. They're struggling with like, I don't have a job, I'm not caring for kids, and have an engagement into those pieces and see if they can make the calls for you, see if they can make the email or do the email, see if they can engage in the conversation, but to engage that piece and see if, what happens why we feel so isolated and lonely right now is because we're struggling with connection. We don't have that connection with this false sense of connection through social media and through technology. But we also lose our purpose. And so allowing other voices to speak for you or with you and sharing the load on that piece.
So I know that there are a lot more questions that we didn't get to, but I want to be respectful of people's time. It is after 11:30. There's a couple of things that I want to make sure that I say, and then I'm not going to make promises on anyone else's behalf, but I'm sure several at least will stick around if there are specific additional questions. But the stack of questions that didn't get asked, I think, speaks to perhaps the need to do another one of these. So I first just want to say thank you to Bethany and Haley for organizing this, for bringing together this incredible panel of women, and for drawing in so many community members to have a really important and impactful conversation. Thank you to all of you for making the choice to be here and not tending to one of your other hat duties that you all have. And thank you to all of you for making that same choice. While we're here talking about values-based issues, I want to remind everybody that we are in a primary period right now. The last day to vote in this primary is on Election Day, May 5th. And if you choose to wait until Election Day, May 5th, you will vote at your local voting location. If you are someone who votes by mail, a change that was made at the state level that I did not vote for requires that if you're going to mail in your ballot, it actually needs to be received by the Board of Election by Election Day. None of us have control over the mail. None of us can predict the timing of the mail. So I strongly encourage not voting by mail. And if you're going to vote by mail, get it in ASAP. Because again, we don't have control over how that works. Was there anything else that I was supposed to say? I'll give this back to you.
There really is so much that we could say, but we're going to save it for the podcast. If you're not already following It's American Motherhood, and one thing that we specifically talked about today is education, and I wanted to call out our current series, the Schoolhouse series that Yana is leading for us. So the idea behind that is to spread the word, the education that we learned through our role in the campaign last fall for the school levy to busy moms and busy parents everywhere. So please tune in, share that. That would be wonderful. I also wanted to say thank you to everyone for being here, to the 5 of you, and also other local representatives who some were here and they had to go. But I specifically wanted to call out a candidate here, first-time candidate. Shelby is in the back, and I wanted to just encourage her and to all of you as moms to continue to participate. Yeah, you are here today, and that's wonderful. And I know that I'm so energized and so excited by the conversation we've had today. And I hope that all of you, and Shelby especially, feel that. So.
And then also, as far as questions that we didn't get to, we'll do our best to get those answered. And if you put your information on our sign-in sheet, we'll send you an email with whatever information we can get. If you have other questions, you can email us at americanmotherhood@gmail.com and we'll get back to you. Also wanted to direct you to our literature at the back table. There's a bunch of resources for like podcasts, news sources, information to prepare for the primaries, groups and organizations you might be interested in getting involved with, and then just another kind of little cheat sheet on 10 ways that moms can realistically get involved. Thank you all again for coming, and hopefully you felt like you got something out of this and are ready to go forward and participate more.
We have the space until noon, so have at it.